Okay, so it's a conjoint presentation by myself and Gianluca Corbellini, who is the CEO of HivePower, a spin-off of our institute. Uh, as I already said, we have a slightly different non-technical approach, and I will do some reflections on the shifting role of customs end users in this energy transition period. When we are looking at the smart world, smart grid world, and the transition world, we basically have this given idea of the customers who is constantly linked to his either smartphone or tablet, looking at all his devices and the energy consumption, controlling or activating his different devices. Of course, we also, when we started in this area 10 years ago, we were very much influenced by this idea and this picture of end consumers. And we shortly noticed that this was quite an ideal and prototypic understanding of end consumers. Of course, in the first day, when you have such a kind of system, you probably really are observing all the time what is going on in your house, but then you shift to or you abandon rather rapidly this endeavor. And we understood that it's quite difficult or not very helpful to try to control all the devices in a household, because most of the devices are becoming more and more energy and efficient than what you can really do and achieve by controlling them and activating them in opportune moments is really bringing not a lot of benefit. So we shifted from, let's say, an approach to control all the device to just focus on the large devices, like the most energy consuming devices like boilers, heat pumps, and of course also batteries for electric vehicles. So this image of the end consumers is very much presented by a lot of large companies who try to sell their devices and systems. But in reality, of course, customers like to rely on automatic systems where they don't have, which are optimizing their consumption to certain signals, which they can rely on and which give them sufficient comfort, or which is not limiting their comfort. So this is what we really understood after quite a short time of studying a little bit this under. Nevertheless, the changes in the landscape of power system is clear and is manifold also for the end consumers. So looking at a little bit at the different changes we can observe in the technical field, we really assist, and this is no news for you, of course, the electrifications of the heating cooling system of the house and also of the mobility system. The availability of convenient energy production systems like PV and storage technologies for residential use, including electric vehicles, and then also the availability of intelligent control application and massive use of ICT. This is basically what technologies we have now at our disposal for reasonable costs. At the same time, we observe significant changes from the economic point of view, with introducing of new and smart tariffs, grid-aware tariffs, and so on. We are introducing new types of markets where customers can participate. They also witness clear falling marginal energy costs, which of course is is nice for end customers. It poses a lot of problems for utilities, it forces them to change their role and business model. And of course, this has implications also for the end customers. He has to be learned that his electric bill will not be only based on the energy consumption, but has also other components. And it is very likely that these electric bills will change in the next future, with more and more users and customers doing self-consumption. And then, of course, last but not least, we have quite significant and fundamental changes in the regulatory area, where we can do self-consumptions. This is quite recent. We have the possibility and opportunity to create self-consumption communities. And of course, there is also on the agenda the full liberalization of the end user market, and also for grid services. So it's a really a large change in this landscape, and where we really go in a very schematic way from a very simple customer relation in the old world, let's say, where we had a monopolistic context. We had just one-way relation between DSO and end customer, where the customer was basically a price taker. He had no other options than to consume. Of course, and this is important, he had in general a very good service and a very good supply, so a very reliable system, and therefore also he was willing to pay this price. And also comparing, when we say this is a very simple relation, and we often say, well, the grid was very dumb compared to smart grid. Of course, this I would not really share this opinion, since the grid really functioned in a very reliable and it was a very sophisticated, or still is a very sophisticated system, which was really working very well. This morning we had very nice presentations on how this system is shifting rapidly, and this also means for the end consumer that he has now is integrated in multiple and complex relationships. So already the relation with the DSO is in two ways. He then or can be included or integrated in peer-to-peer markets, and at the same moment he is able to do self-consumption. And more we also see the appearance of aggregators where the end customer can participate also for delivering ancillary services. So this is clear a very strong shift, and to which extent the end consumer and also the becoming prosumer is aware of these changes is rather an open question. But it is a clear fact that the end user is really in a very, very strong shift, and has, of course, also completely new opportunities. So this also leads to a strong and profound change in the local energy market, from, as I said, a monopolistic system to a system where we have different players, such as consumers, prosumers, aggregators, and we have more and more sophisticated objectives of optimizations, of course, also contradicting and conflicting objectives of optimizations. First of all, of course, we still try, and the DSO and the electric and the power system tries to maximize the social welfare, to try to minimize the infrastructure costs, and so by using intelligent and control mechanisms. And of course, a huge problem is the non-discriminatory problem of this new design of markets. So at the moment, this is in law that DSOs should not discriminate end consumers. And with the appearance of self-consumptions and self-consumptions communities, of course, there is room for discrimination between customers who can participate in these markets or not. And then we see also a large different mechanisms for clearing methods of these local markets. I just mentioned here three approaches, just to say how complex the system has become in a couple of years. What does that mean? Just to give you an idea of the quantities, the households represent about 30% of a third of the consumption of the power, and it is representing about 85% of the actors. So we have roughly 3.8 million of households in Switzerland compared to roughly 0.6 million companies. So the large share of the market in terms of figures is clearly by the households and residential markets, and this is the large bunch of the actors we have to deal with, but it is only representing a third of the whole energy market. What kind of involvement can we distinguish in these new conditions? We see basically three different forms of involvement and in different stages, where we have the smart energy consumers, the most simple form of participation. The users is just using some kind of smart technology offered by his DSO and is contributing to energy cost optimization. Whereas the prosumer is quite a different form of participating and involvement in the energy market. He's the emerging actor in the energy transition, and he is basically also involved in decisions of investments in energy generation technologies, in the optimization of investments and energy costs. And of course, he is really has a proactive behavior in the energy transition. And whether this will also have as consequences on other areas of the system is still open to debate. And then we have another form of participation is that the member of self-consumption communities, which can be a combination of the further two categories of actors, combination of smart consumers and prosumers. And his involvement is basically in the willingness to participate in this kind of communities. All the communities depend on this willingness, and he is also active in the energy optimization. So concluding my short reflection on the actor involvement, the energy transition is transforming the role of the end consumers, as well as the end consumer is transforming or reshaping the energy landscape. The transforming is only in its initial stages, and we will still have a lot of challenges for the planning, controlling of the grid and the forecasting of also the consumption and production of these consumers to ensure the constant balancing and reliable supply. In this transition, the prosumer as an emerging and central actor is certainly leading a fundamental change in the overall economy. And this is probably a more philosophical question in the overall economy and society is similar to energy transitions in the past. And whether this will really happen, we will see only in the future. With concluding with this more general and philosophical question, I would like to hand over to Gianluca, who gives you some insight in a much more practical area in some pilot and demonstration projects where we apply these technologies developed in the last 10 years in our institute.
Yeah, thank you, Roman. Sorry, I have to ask you to stop your sharing.
Yes, I do. Please.
Super cool. Got it. Now you should see my screen. So I can continue the presentation. In a few minutes, I would like to introduce you to 3 projects where we are working or we worked on in the past. And they all include the consumers, prosumers perspective in today and future landscape. So the first one is the LEAK project. LEAK just stands for Lugaggia Innovation Community. So it's a self-consumption community that we established just out of Lugano, together with the local utility, that is AEM, the Azienda Elettrica di Massagno. It includes 18 single-family houses, 1 kindergarten, and we also added 1 district battery that is used mostly for the self-consumption at the community level. So as you see, we already have a sort of good flexibility in this community, especially for heaters for domestic hot water, heat pumps, and we also added now 1 electric vehicle. So the purpose in this project is to study, analyze, and optimize the behavior of this energy community. I can show you also some, this is a more, let's say, overall perspective of the project. So we really address all the important topics, let's say. So we start from the technology. So we see how we can steer the flexible devices that I mentioned before through the existing smart meter technology, the economics. So at the end, how much is the advantage for the DSO to implement this new framework for the final users and so on. We had interviews. We are going to have, again, interviews with all the stakeholders, so with all the people involved, companies, technology providers. And then, of course, we can try to, at the end of the project, to analyze the policies, how it is effective to promote this new framework. So we developed as HivePower a software that is basically a web tool to monitor and also control, optimize the behavior of the community. Here we see just an overall overview of a daily production and consumption in this community. So it's 1 day. You see that for the users, it is also pretty clear how much of the energy consumed it came from the internal community production, how much is coming from the grid, so basically entering the community and the point of common coupling, and how much is coming from the battery. So in the first chart. So in the second, of course, it's just the production that is done in the community only by solar power on rooftops. And so you see also how much is going to the battery, to the grid, or to the community. And of course, the operation of the battery is pretty simple. In this simple community, we charge it during the day when we have exceeding solar generation, and then we discharge it during typically the evening or early morning. The purpose here is multiple, so it's a multi-objective optimization that is not trivial, of course. So we optimize it for the community, but also for the DSO to have.
Unfortunately, we lost the audio.
Yes. I just.
Sorry. I think I touched the speaker.
Thank you.
Sorry. So this is a monthly overview of the production and consumption again. Then we're also analyzing and monitoring the peak production in at the point of common coupling. So we see just, for example, in this day, it was quite effective to reduce dramatically the injection of power into the grid, but also in a nice way also the peak power in the consumption. Then how do we promote the self-consumption internally in the community is through dynamic pricing. So it's a sort of implicit promotion of self-consumption. And the pricing for selling and buy the energy internally, but also externally, is changing every 15 minutes through a transparent formula that all the prosumers can see and can evaluate. But basically, it's just when there is an exceeding solar energy, it becomes very cheap to buy energy for the community, and when also the energy from the battery is also a bit more expensive than the internal energy. Then the second use case I would like to present you is for A and B. It's another utility in Bellinzona. There for them as well, the problem was to perform a peak shaving because they pay a significant amount of money to their energy provider because of these monthly peaks. So we implemented a new tariff scheme for them. So every day they have this opt-in possibility. So far they have something like 200 to 300 users adopting this scheme. And every day they have still a simple tariff, low and high prices. But what is changing every day is the timing. So the timing of when there is a high tariff is different. And in this chart, we see when there is a colored band, we are in the high tariff. In the white band, we are in the low tariff. So basically, it happens when there is a lot of solar generation in the midday, or also when they use the hydropower. So what we did in this project is that first step we modeled the local energy demand. We implemented a forecasting tool to forecast it every day, the day ahead. Then on top of this forecasting, we optimized the hydropower generation. They have something like 15 megawatts with a limited storage. And then on top of this profile, that is the forecasted demand minus the hydropower generation, we are optimizing this dynamic tariff. The purpose of this tariff is to convince the final users to do load shifting to the loads that they can shift. So basically it could be the dishwasher, the washing machine, but even more important, the electric vehicles. So the owners of electric vehicles are already quite happy to adopt this new tariff scheme. They can have significant amount of savings on an annual base, estimated between 100 and 300 Swiss francs per vehicle. And also what they are implementing is to install, actually they are already installing a small IoT, a small gateway that is connected via LoRa connection and connected to the electric vehicle charger. So it will automatically charge your car when there is a low tariff. So this is another way to involve the prosumers and consumers, because they could have an active role helping the grid, and of course they have a bonus, they have incentives at economic level. The third and final use case is for another utility, again in Ticino, Azienda Elettrica di Massagno, AEM. So what we implemented here, this is similar but mandatory for all the users. So it's not an opt-in, it's applied to every user in their customer base. Again, the purpose is to perform peak shaving. And in this case, we implemented a power-based tariff. So we set a threshold that is something like 2.2 kilowatt. And so if you consume during 1 month more than this power, you will also pay sort of power penalty. The idea of the DSO here is to limit the number of high power EV charging, typically like 11 or even 22 kilowatt at the residential level. And again, the goal is to do peak shaving. The tariff scheme will be active from January 2021, but we are already thinking to some extension, to some improvement for 2022. especially considering also the time of use. Because if you're charging your vehicle late night, maybe if you charge it even at 22 kilowatt, it's not an issue at all for the grid. So we also have to consider this timing in this pricing. So this is again another way to involve a final consumer. The main constraint we have to deal with in this kind of tariff design is that we have to make it very simple, because every user have to be able to understand it and work on it, let's say. And both of these tariff scheme, the one with AEM and the one with AMB, they've been discussed with the authority, with ELCOM, and they've been approved. So we also went through this step. So finally, to conclude my talk, I think that in the near future, consumers' involvement will be very important to obtain real what we call smart grids, because they will be involved in different frameworks in energy communities. That is also booming globally. We also have many contacts in Italy or other countries where this is becoming a big reality. They can follow dynamic pricing or even power-based tariffs. So it is something that they never think about it in the past, but it could be quite important. Personally, I believe a lot in the vehicle to grid as a business model, both for the prosumers but also for the aggregators. And then, of course, they have to understand that they have to allow the remote control of their devices. There could be heat pumps, electric vehicles, boilers that are already controlled actually, both for the demand side management, so a kind of soft controlling, or a more hard one with demand response. So as a final remark, I would say that I think it's very important to educate the users, the consumers, prosumers, everyone, but also the aggregators to all these new frameworks and all the benefits that they can get from this framework.